All right, good morning, everyone. We can go ahead and get started. So welcome to the 2021 Waccamaw Conference. And this is the Source Seminar Series, and our webinar today is Coming Together at Winyah Bay, a panel discussion with museums, small businesses, and community groups around the Winyah Bay. So thank you all for taking the time to be here. My name is Maeve Snyder. I'm the Coastal Training Program Coordinator at the North Inlet Winyah Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. I'll introduce our speakers and co-hosts in just a minute, but before we get started, I want to just give a few quick tips about our virtual platform today. So we're using Zoom webinar. I think a lot of us are familiar with Zoom by now, but just as a reminder, you're going to be muted with your webcam turned off during the webinar. We recommend closing any other programs or closing out of other tabs to improve your connection. And if you're having any technical issues, leaving the webinar and rejoining will solve a lot of problems. And you can also ask for help in the Q&A box in the control panel at the bottom of your screen, which should look like this. So you'll see we have a raised hand button. We're not going to use that today, but if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A box right here. The Q&A is open to you at any point during the webinar. We definitely encourage you to ask questions, whether it's technical issues or a question for the speakers. We might circle back to it during a question period at the end of presentations, but we definitely see all the questions that come in. The hosts for the 2021 Waccamaw Conference include the Winyah Rivers Alliance, the North Inlet Winyah Bay NEAR, American Rivers, and the Coastal Waccamaw Stormwater Education Consortium. We have another conference planner on the webinar today. So Kara, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Sure, thanks, Maeve. Excuse me. I'm Kara Schultnick. I'm your Waccamaw River Keeper with Winyah Rivers Alliance, and we're one of the co-hosts of the Waccamaw Conference. And this is Jezebel, my assistant for the day. And we're just really excited to have y'all join us for this virtual webinar series. Waccamaw Conference is a little bit different this year, but we've been having a really great time making it bigger and better than it's ever been before. So we're happy y'all can join us today. Thanks.
Thanks, Kara. And we have an amazing group of panel speakers today. They represent a number of different organizations all around the city of Georgetown and Winyah Bay. I'll briefly introduce them and then I'll let them tell you more about themselves when they give a quick presentation. We have Sydney Norris from the Belle W. Baroque Foundation, Marilyn Hemingway with the Gullah Chamber of Commerce, Justin Mcintyre with the South Carolina Maritime Museum, Zenobia Harper with the Gullah Preservation Society, and Mary Boyd with the Georgetown County Museum. So just as a quick overview to kind of orient us in place, because this whole conference has been a journey down the Waccamaw River, starting up at Lake Waccamaw in North Carolina and traveling all the way down to Winyah Bay throughout the watershed. So it's a huge watershed spanning 2 states and over 140 miles. And each week of the Waccamaw Conference, we focused on a different section of the watershed. So this week, it's all coming together at the confluence of Winyah Bay. And so we just wanted to take a quick second to find out where all of you are coming from. So Kara, could you go ahead and launch a quick poll? So let us know, where are you in the Winyah Bay watershed? All right, I see some answers coming in. And we'll just give it one more second. All right, go ahead and share the results. So this is great. Most people are in Winyah Bay or Georgetown, which is our focus for today, but we have people all the way up to Conway and the Waccamaw Neck. So it's good to see people all over the watershed. All right. So with that, I don't want to delay anymore, and I'll turn it over to our first panel speaker, Sydney Norris with the Baroque Foundation. So Sydney, whenever you're ready, you can go on screen and go ahead and share.
I'm glad to see all of y'all. I did make a PowerPoint presentation because Hopkobirney, where I am right now, where we're talking about, is so beautiful that pictures are just primary. So let me share my screen. Okay, hang on. Do y'all see it? No. Okay.
Not yet.
Here we go. How's that?
We still see all of PowerPoint.
Okay, hang on. It worked before.
If you try from beginning, that should make it full screen.
Ah, thanks, y'all.
Perfect.
Thank you, Meg. Hobcaw Barony in Georgetown County is owned by the Bell W. Baroque Foundation, but we use the terms interchangeably, Baroque Foundation, Hobcaw Barony. In the strictest sense of it, the Bell Baroque Foundation's organization, Hobcaw Barony, is the land. So, but you'll hear us say both things, and Hobcaw Barony is kind of our public face. I've put our mission right there because our mission is research and conservation. And so mostly by colleges and universities in South Carolina. These are the organizations, that's our the sign out in front of Hobcaw Barony. And so those are the research entities that have homes here. Near the North Inlet Estuarine Research Reserve is here. They're on the sign under USC. They kind of work under their auspices, so they didn't get a separate entry. Of those four entities, I only represent the Baroque Foundation, so I'm not going to tell you anything about research because somebody else can do that so much better than I can. Hobcaw Barony has been around. It was a grant to a grandson of one of the Lord proprietors in 1718. So that map on our left is a map from that era. Yeah, history doesn't quit happening. The map on the right is from the early 30s when Northern industrialists were coming down and buying plantations in South Carolina. So it just kind of showed the span, and who doesn't love a map? But South Carolina history is a big part of what goes on here. It's 16,000 acres. That map on a page shows Hobcaw Barony. It's the bottom tip of the Waccamaw neck. Hobcaw was an Indian word that meant between the waters, and there it is between the Waccamaw River and between the Atlantic Ocean. And the different colors are for kind of different habitats and ecologies you'll find here. The dark blue are rice fields, the light blue are salt marshes, and then pine forest, hardwood forest, cypress forest, and beaches, coasts. That picture on the left, the original King's Highway from Boston to Savannah ran through what's now Hobcaw Barony, and it's a road we use often. So just a little more ecology and history marrying. The biggest way, the most prominent way we mix with the community and community mix with us is with our daily Discover Hobcaw tours. During ordinary times, 14 up to 14 participants get on a tour bus and spend 2 or 3 hours here learning about everything that goes on here on Hobcaw Barony. That picture on the left is a tour coming out of a slave cabin. We have 4 slave villages that are still here, either remnants or big buildings. And that cabin is the least changed of all the ones you can still see here. So that's why people go in it. Bernard Baruch, so when you go on the tour, you learn about some of the historic residents. Bernard Baruch was the next to the last private owner of Hobcaw Barony, and he's the one that put it on the 20th century map. Bernard Baruch was born in South Carolina, moved to New York as a child, made his fame and fortune in New York, and acquired Hobcaw Barony as his hunt camp. That picture on the right is Mr. Baruch and his cronies just coming in from duck hunting. They're all on the pier at Hobcaw House. You can see the house in the background there. The picture on the left is Mr. Baruch with his good friend Winston Churchill. And the big reason that's the picture you use is because that really does demonstrate the depth and breadth of the connections he had and the influence he wielded. They were great friends. So there's Hobcaw House, Mr. Baruch's house, his I love to call it hunt camps. I thought my dad never took me to a hunt camp to look anything like that. And that's 45 minutes at least of the tour you go on when you come here on one of the Daily Discover Hobcaw tours. That house was built in 1930 because the house that was there before burned in a fire in the 20s. It is 13,000 square feet, 9 bedrooms, and you'll see a lot of evidence there of Mr. Baroque and his famous guests. FDR came and spent a month here when his doctors told him he had to go gain his strength when he grew so sick in 1944. And it's gorgeous. It really is the premium geography here on Hobcaw Barony. Belle Baroque, Mr. Baroque's daughter, he let her buy Hobcaw Barony from him, and so she was the final private owner. Her will established our foundation. And that's her with him on the left, one of my favorite pictures, because they're so obviously fond of each other. That picture of Belle with her gun is during her heyday here in Hobcaw Barony, because she would fish and shoot and trap and hunt and dog the steps of anybody who was doing something out here. And I don't know if you can see it, because on my Zoom or picture coming up, but that picture is Belle feeding her pet deer, they call dearie deer, on the back porch of her house, Bellefield, right there, which you will also see on the daily tour. Excuse me. Friendfield Village, I mentioned it before, but cabins built in slave villages, some dating from 1840, some got built as late as 1896, but people lived in them until the 1950s. So that's a big part of the story as well. On the left is Belle. Belle is a self-appointed truant officer for the school here, and that's a picture from the 30s of her riding through Strawberry Village and making sure a little girl didn't need to ride to school. The picture on the left there is my favorites. It's a wedding in Friendfield Village in the 20s. And we have a couple from that day that we like a lot. The bride is Laura Kennedy, a daughter of William Kennedy, who was Mr. Baroque's superintendent of the woods, was Belle's superintendent of the woods. Another picture of Friendfield Village. You have to get here in a very special 2 weeks in March to see the snowdrops in the village, and that's the church, Friendfield Church, and to its left or right is the doctor's office. Other programs for adults happen all over the place. This is a picture of our camellia tea. That's our horticulturist, Patricia Michoud, showing people how to propagate camellias, about different varieties of camellias. She waxes camellias, she air layers camellias, and those happen in the spring. And that's one example of other things, special exhibitions you can see besides the daily tour. Another one people like is our North Inlet boat tour. That's Richard Cameron, one of our educators. And about 3 times a year, he and Captain Paul Kenny take folks out on Winyah Bay, alligator tracks, all sorts of birds, all sorts of ecological curiosities and interesting things right here from Hobcaw Barony. Don't want to leave the children out. We have cast net trips. We teach them how to crab and cane pole fish. We have ecology camp every summer. We have ecology camp for tweens this year. So please go on our website and learn more about that. I always think those tweens, that middle school, they're kind of they fall between the cracks sometimes. So Sarah Beth Freitag, our youth educator, has really devised some cool things for them. We're always looking for volunteers. That's Bill Hoyle, one of our yeoman volunteers, talking to tour participants on the dock at Hobcaw House. Down the left there, some salient sorts of facts. If you're interested, we train you. It's a mild commitment. You get discounts at the shop at the Hobcaw Barony Discovery Center, and you get to spend free time here on beautiful Hobcaw Barony. My title is Director of Development, so fundraising is my first gig, and our special events will come back in 2022. Our hunt breakfast is kind of our signature event. please join us on 22nd of January. It's ham biscuits and Bloody Marys and a really great auction on the grounds at Belfield House. So we would love to see you there. Oh, those are my slides.
Thanks so much, Sydney. That was great. All right, I'd like to turn it over to our next panelist, Marilyn Hemingway with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. Marilyn, whenever you're ready, you can pull up your screen.
Well, I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do want to start with spiritual. We sometimes forget how connected the Gullah Geechee African Americans are connected to the water. And you hear it in our spirituals. So wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. See those people dressed in white. They look like the children of the Israelites. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. The reason I sing this song is because, it speaks to our connection to the water. And one of the connection to the water is one of the reasons I'm with you today. Because my great-grandparents met on Sandy Island, which is found between the PD and the Waccamaw rivers. And my great-grandfather, Adam Dunmore, had to travel from the Cat Island Plantation, which is now part of the Tommyaki Wildlife Center, via the water to Sandy Island, the Plantersville community. And they met on Sandy Island. My great-grandmother was Miss Charles Lena Ford, and they met and married, had Pauline Dunmore, who met Peter Hemingway and had my father, and hence my father married my mother, and I'm here. And that's just a very personal connection to the water, but also our connection to the water is the knowledge our ancestors had of controlling the water and managing the land to grow the rice. All too often we hear about the enslaved Africans were brought here because they knew how to grow the rice. And I think it's more context. We need to understand really the context of that. They were enslaved and brought here because they knew how to control the water through the trunk system, these rivers, and they knew how to manage the land, clear the land to grow the rice. And that's a very important nuance that we need to understand, because to this day, it informs who we are. And it's also one of the reasons I started the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, because I started the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce to create global awareness, profitability, and sustainability of African American business and other entities within the Gullah community. But we advocate for environmental justice, addressing climate change, and education about career and business opportunities in green renewable energy because of our connection to the water and our connection to the land. We have always been a community that reduced, reused, and recycled. And we've always been a community that's understood the power of water. But with that said, we have a traumatic relationship with water because one, we were brought over water to be enslaved, to use water to grow something, to create wealth for another community. So our relationship has been traumatic with water. We've been lynched and our bodies left in water. In 1953, there was a lynching in Georgetown. And the family is actually still in Georgetown, where the gentleman was shot and his body left in the water, in the Sanpet River, which flows into the Winyah Bay. This is documented. And there's, in the 1980s, there was an assumed lynching also, where the gentleman was lynched in the Winyah Bay. So this is recent trauma to our community and still impacts us to this day. But then we also have a relationship with the water where we understand that the water can also return us to our familial connections to the motherland. For example, our positive, which actually is a positive relationship with the water. We pour libations with water into the river to honor and pay homage to our ancestors. Two, the water has allowed us to build our churches, our homes. Bethel AME in the historic district of the city of Georgetown was built from wood that was floated down the Waccamaw River to the base of Duke Street, carried on the shoulders of the congregation, and where the church stands now, the original edifice of the church was built by master carpenters who had recently left the plantations after the Civil War, and they built that church. The same thing happened with the Bethesda Baptist Church. The logs were floated by the recently freed enslaved down the Waccamaw River to the base of Wood Street, placed on the shoulders of the congregation, and taken to where you see the church is located now. It is not until later that the current structures that you see now were built. Back in Bethel was encased in 1908 in brick. So the original church is actually still inside Bethel. And for Bethesda, they actually built a sanctuary back in the 1940s. So our connection to the water is one of trauma, but it's also one of triumph. And with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, I wanted to celebrate that by looking at the bigger picture of our connection to the environment, connection to the water and the land, and incorporating that in our economic uplift. So on a very personal level, this is why I'm with you today, is that my great-grandparents traversed those rivers, traversed the Waccamaw River to meet each other. And then on a community level, we use the water to grow. Out of the greatest, darkest period, we use the river to grow and create our community through our buildings, our homes, etc. I think it's important, and all too often, that we talk more about the trauma and we don't realize it. We talk in terms of how African Americans, there's this rumor that we can't swim. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think because of our traumatic relationship with the water, that we've become disconnected in some ways with who we are, the ancestral ties, those familiar connections. But I think what I see happening now is, especially our younger generation, they're becoming more and more aware of what it means to be Gullah. They're appreciating it more, and they're reaching out, trying to find out what those connections are. And it's an opportunity for us to educate and engage truly as Gullah. I don't think there are a lot of people who wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm Gullah. We certainly look in the mirror and probably say, I'm Black and how I'm going to work this day. And that's a whole nother conversation. But we are Gullah. And I tell people that I'm a Gullah from up and down the coast. I don't necessarily announce it, but that's who we are. It's how we worship. It's how we eat the food ways. It's our connection to the water. It's our connection to the land. And I think this younger generation, from what I'm seeing, they're spending more time embracing and appreciation who they are, which means we're going to head back to the water. You're going to see more of us taking up the swimming, taking up the kayaking, appreciating the blue waves, and understanding that they were the original highways. That's how people travel, mostly by the waterways. Now, of course, it's mostly cars and asphalt, but I think people are starting to reconnect to the water. With that in mind, the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, we started the Gullah Geechee Environmental and Energy conferences, conversations, and roundtables to start making connections between environmental organizations and our community so that we can all benefit and address climate change. Also for career and business opportunities, not just job creation, but a path to careers and business opportunities. And I think through this movement, it has created an ability to heal. Because when it's all said and done, water is life. And in our community, I think we inherently have an understanding of that. We've just become disconnected because of the trauma that through water. But now I think we're starting a process of healing, and that water will be a vehicle for economic and environmental justice. So I'm glad to be here today, very open to take any questions, and look forward to hearing from the other panelists.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Yeah, we definitely encourage anyone to put questions in the Q&A box, but for now, I think we'll move on to our next speaker, Justin Mcintyre with the South Carolina Maritime Museum.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, there's the two of us who are on staff here at the museum. Justin Mcintyre.
Hope McFadden, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so we're going to double up for our presentation here, just like Marilyn. We don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you all today, but we got some good stuff about the museum to share. Just a little bit of a background. The South Carolina Maritime Museum falls under a bigger parent organization, which is called the Harper Historical Association, which is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit. So some folks will ask us this question, whether we're a state or a county or Georgetown entity, which we are not. So we're on our own, and we're doing a good job here. The Georgetown Wind Boat Show, which many of you have heard of out there, also falls under this Harper Historical Association. And that started in 1996. And the museum is located at 729 Front Street, which the museum just started out as a little one-room establishment, moved into Front Street here in 2011, and we expanded in 2017. And that's kind of where the museum stands at present. Our mission is to preserve and promote the maritime history of Georgetown County and South Carolina. And I'd like to emphasize the South Carolina portion of that. Of course, the history with Georgetown County, that was our foundation, and we've since expanded from there, as some of the folks who have visited our museum have seen. We cover a lot of different parts of the state. So from Little River to the Savannah River, if it's on, by, under, or close to the water, we are interested in it. And yeah, Hope, can you tell us a little more about our hours?
Yeah, so like Justin said, we're located in the historic district of Georgetown, 729 Front Street. We're open Monday through Saturday, 11 to 5. We've got some really wonderful exhibits. Had some really special partnerships with some of you as well, which has been a great way for us to expand sort of our outreach as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we mentioned at the beginning here, there's just the two of us on staff. We are a small establishment, but we try to do a lot.
Yeah, we do.
With a little.
And we have a great kind of center board that's really involved and great group of volunteers. We're always looking for more. So if you're interested in joining us, stop on by, give us a call. We'd love to have more volunteers. Always can use some, as I'm sure every one of you know.
Yeah, that's for sure. And at the museum here, I mean, we cover the maritime world. As many of you know, of course, our focus is on South Carolina, but throughout our history, we haven't been alone. We reach out with Africa, Europe. I'm sure somewhere there's a connection with Asia as well. Definitely some of the ships, such as the Henrietta, which was the largest wooden sailing vessel built in South Carolina, just up the Waccamaw at Bucksville. Met her demise, unfortunately, but had traveled all the way to Japan. This is in the 1890s. So yeah, we reach out across the world and really across time. And it's not just history we're interested in here, also the sciences as well. Yes, history is our bread and butter, but we've touched on topics related to paleontology. We had a big exhibit a few years ago. That was my first one when I joined on here, called Beneath Dark Waters, which looked at South Carolina low country fossils, which was a lot of fun to do. That we still have part of it in existence, which is our Megalodon exhibit. That could be our most popular one, definitely for everybody from whether you're 5 or 95. Folks are really interested in that, and giant sharks are really cool. So we like to have that on display and talk about our Megalodon friends. We also touched on meteorology. A couple years ago, we had a most violent storm, which covered South Carolina hurricanes. And since we're coming up on hurricane season,
Very soon,
portions of that exhibit will come out as well to match up with our Atlantic Basin hurricane tracking map, which we had set up now. I figured, what are we going into our third season? Third season of tracking tropical cyclones. So yeah, definitely come by and check that out as well during hurricane season. Hopefully it won't be as busy as last season, but we'll see. And also ecological topics. Like Hope mentioned, we've partnered with a lot of great organizations and individuals out there, not only from Horry County, but as far south as Beaufort as well. Some of the folks, it was the Santa Elena History Center. They've kind of morphed in with the Coastal Discovery Museum that's there on Hilton Head. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and as far west as Columbia, getting to meet new people and establish new friendships with those folks. But Professor Till Hannabuth with Coastal Carolina University, he's been working on the Sandpit River project, and he stops in from time to time, so we chat with him. Eric Smith, which we saw him as one of the guests out there with the North Inlet, Winyah Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. We've partnered with Eric a couple times, and we have a water quality monitor that feeds off their monitors, and that's always on display at the museum as well, along with a couple panels. So that's cool, having that side of sort of our Georgetown area water-related topics. And so, like I mentioned, yeah, we've established a lot of great friendships. In particular, in the fall, we hosted the Smithsonian's traveling exhibit, Waterways, and that's where a number of folks here today that we really kind of cemented that relationship with them when we were thinking of ideas of what to do. Of course, the corona spoiled a lot of our plans, but still the exhibit went off and was successful. And so we appreciate everybody who partnered with us on that. It really did make a difference. And we had a couple thousand people just in 6 weeks visit us. And that benefited us, but it also benefited Georgetown and the area as well, I think, with not only local folks, but visitors to the area as well. And again, kind of echoing Marilyn, water does unite us, again, not only physically, but through time as well. And so it's always been a part of our history, and it will continue to be a part of our history for good or bad.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about our fundraisers here at the South Carolina Maritime Museum. Like Justin mentioned, the Georgetown Wooden Boat Show is our largest fundraiser, traditionally held the third Saturday and Sunday in October. This year, we'll see. Got our fingers crossed. But we also have a great core group, Friends of the Museum, which is our membership. So we're very thankful for individuals and families and businesses that support us and continue to see that we're working hard on sharing not only Georgetown history related to water, but South Carolina in general as well. We've got a couple of other little things. The Browns Ferry, which is not located here. It's at the Rice Museum, but we've got some information on it as well as bricks that were actually pulled from the vessel on display at the museum, and a commemorative wall, which you can purchase a brick to dedicate to a loved one. A couple of events that we haven't had for a while, but Burning of the Socks, which we're hoping to bring back, which is a fun sort of boat tradition, fun story. Let's see, what else? Oh, and our big one, of course, is the youth sailing program, which is coming up. We were very thankful to have it a couple months last year. Our instructors were wonderful and took all COVID precautions, and thankfully the kids get to spend time on the water in their own boat safely, having fun, learning, enjoying the water, and it's certainly a pleasure for us as well. We also have grants that we apply for, and of course donations from visitors that come in the museum as well.
This is true, as well as our history for
History for
lunch
lunch.
/ history at home, which is what it's become. We haven't had an in-person event or our history for lunch in a good
while,
year.
but the history at home events turned out to be really well, and thank you all for doing this, because I know it's been quite a challenge to do it all not quite in person, but it's been a learning experience and kind of fun for me anyway.
Yeah, and providing an opportunity to reach folks who would never otherwise be able to make it. We had a guest speaker from Nova Scotia last year for one of the history at homes, and we're in a discussion with he's a museum curator from Glasgow, Scotland, for late summer, early fall. So working with that. So there should be some good stuff coming up, and we'll bring back our lineup of guest speakers here, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, folks, they can get engaged by getting a membership.
Or again, volunteering. We can always use that.
We love our volunteers, and looking for camp counselors or instructors for youth sailing camp. We appreciate their help.
But thank you all so much. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Justin and Hope. Thanks for connecting with us virtually, and thanks for sharing all those ways to engage, hopefully in person in the future. Our next panel speaker is Zenobia Harper with the Gullah Preservation Society. Zenobia, whenever you're ready.
All right, can everybody hear me? All right, my name is Zenobia Harper. I am the founder and the director of the Gullah Preservation Society of Georgetown, South Carolina, Inc. And our mission is the preservation and promotion of the Gullah culture, the history, the language, and the people of Georgetown, South Carolina. I started the organization because I was frankly sick and tired of Georgetown being some kind of appendage to either Horry County or Charleston, and having to always be looped in with those two places. Georgetown County was the seat of rice production. So much of the wealth that was showed off in the Charleston area was created in Georgetown. And so we don't really need to be a part of, I mean, it's fine to be a part of the history of the corridor, the Rice Corridor, Gullah Geechee Corridor, but we have a history here that can certainly stand alone and hold its own when it comes to rice production and everything that surrounded it. And so that's the reason why we started the GPS is what we call it. For those people who don't know, I know that we use the word Gullah Geechee a lot. There are a lot of people that are coming from other places in the country. And sometimes we think we know, we think that people know who the Gullah people are. So I'm just gonna back up and just define that. So Gullah Geechee people are the descendants of enslaved African people that were trafficked to this area for the purposes of rice production, eventually for rice production. Rice had been being grown in West Africa for millennia before this was a country. So a lot of the tools, technology, expertise, and knowledge came in the hands and the minds and the thought process of West African people. So people that were predominantly from West African countries like Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ghana, even Benin, places like that are where many of those people came from. And it's brought the technology and everything with them to grow successful rice. Now, one of the other things that made rice and the development of this area so successful was the fact that we had so many rivers. There are so many rivers that flow into Georgetown County. So we're focused, of course, on the Waccamaw River today, but there are six rivers that flow through Georgetown County. And all of them, as Marilyn said, serve to be major highways for the development of Georgetown County, and it served to be a benefit. Many of the people who came to colonize this area understood the benefit of having so much water around and so many ways to get around. I don't think that people really understand in terms of being able to create infrastructure, be able to build up a community. If you don't have adequate ways to navigate and get around the community, it's hard to build things up. So, so the six rivers, Waccamaw included, was a big deal in rice production. Rice production was huge in terms of the creation of wealth for this area, the creation of a stable economic engine. So rice was king in this area. It was the crop that created the economic engine that moved this place forward. So when we talk about the time period before the Revolutionary War, we're talking about a very powerful group of people in South Carolina, a very powerful group of people, and they became powerful based on many of them rice production before that indigo. But none of these things would have been possible if it were not for the rivers and the many rivers that came into this area. So Gullah Geechee people are the descendants of enslaved African peoples that were trafficked to this area specifically for rice production as rice became this big cash crop. And one of the things that GPS wants people to understand is that before we can talk about the river and the rivers as a place of enjoyment and recreation, we have to think about them as Marilyn said, as a source of life, a source of transportation, as something that we need, and that it's something that we need, and something that we need to care for and respect. So before we can talk about the entertainment of the water, before we could talk about the fun uses of the water, we have to talk about our need to protect it, to keep it safe, because it really is. Water really is life, and there's no other way. There's no other way to put it. So we can't need the use of it more than we protect it and take care of it. I think that another thing that we really want to do is we want to encourage, especially people of African descent, to uh, begin to become closer to the river systems again. If you think about places like the Waccamaw and other places, a lot of those rivers are now, there's not a lot of access to them for people who don't live in gated communities and who don't have access to boats or places to launch their boats and different things like that. And also too, we want to be able to do away with some of the fear that people have of the waters. Um, you know, we are traditionally people who had to spend a lot of time in the water. Rice production meant that you were in water most of the time, sometimes from ankle deep to shoulder deep in all kinds of water systems in Georgetown County. But because those relationships with the water were not oftentimes pleasant, and oftentimes done by force, and that tradition has been handed down from generation to generation. Those memories have been handed down from generation to generation. There's there's kind of this thing where people stay away from the water and don't indulge in some of the things that the water provides. Personally, we grew up on the water. My grandfather was a fisherman. He had a boat, and we went out into the Winyah Bay and traveled mostly the Sanpete River, but in many cases the Waccamaw River to fish. There's also been a change in terms of the way people have been able to utilize the rivers as a source of food because of pollution and different things like that. You're not able to eat out of the rivers the way we used to, and to be able to use the river as a source of food the way we used to. So GPS, the Gullah Preservation Society, really wants to try to help people reconnect with the river systems that serve to make this place so successful, and for more people to be able to get in on the success of this area and all of the things that this area has to provide. But for the most part, we want people to know and understand that the history of the rivers and to have respect for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Zenobia. All right, let's move on to our final speaker, Mary Boyd with the Georgetown County Museum.
Mute. Hello. Hi, good morning. Let me pull up my PowerPoint presentation. And let's see. All right. Now, okay. Good morning. I am Mary Boyd with the Georgetown County Museum and Historical Society. We are not a part of Georgetown County, as our name may imply. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We derive 100% of our funding from memberships, sales in our Rice Trunk gift shop, donations, and fundraisers such as our signature event called Cat Tales and Cocktails, which has been held annually. Unfortunately, this spring we have not been able to do that. And we have our first Tuesday lecture series, which due to COVID should begin probably in the middle of the summer, we hope. We are located at 120 Broad Street, and we are back to our pre-COVID schedule. I'm happy to announce as of 2 weeks ago, we are open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 11 to 3. Our building has 2 floors. The first floor gallery is a timeline of Georgetown's 300 years of history. And on the second floor, we have all of the artifacts that go along with the story that is downstairs. We're totally handicapped accessible, and we welcome individual and large groups. At the current time, we are still requiring masks along with the city and county and state guidelines. Now, the focus of the Georgetown County Historical Society is to preserve and educate the public about the rich history and culture and heritage of this area. Now, it's going to be impossible to get 292 years of Georgetown history into this short segment, so I thought I'd concentrate on several American firsts that Georgetown enjoys. Our first earliest American first was the building of the first bank, or the first banking house in America. It was built in 1735. It's on the corner of Prince and Scriven Streets at 632 Prince Street. On the left, you can see what the building probably originally looked like, and on the right is the way that it looks today. The building was a bank until at least the 1850s, and we don't really have documentation for when it ended as a bank, but it was a boarding house after that. And in 1910, it was bought by the Masonic Lodge. So it was the Masonic Lodge for most of its history in the 21st century. We also have the very first free school in America, built in 1757 by the local indigo growers at that time. It remained a school until 1908, when it finally was absorbed into the Georgetown County public school system. This building was built in 1857 and still remains today, although not a school. It is the Winyah Indigo Society Hall, where they have their annual meetings, and it's just a venue for all kinds of social events, dances and weddings and such as that. In 1777, Georgetown was the very first place that the Marquis de Lafayette stepped into America. June 13th, 1777, he was bound for Charleston to help in the American cause. Found out that Charleston was blockaded by the British and diverted a little bit north into Winyah Bay, and found himself here on the shores of Mr. Benjamin Eugee's plantation. He stayed probably overnight and into the next day, and then went on his way to join George Washington. Another American first is that Georgetown was the largest indigo grower of anywhere in the world. Now, indigo is a low-growing bushy plant that gives off a dark blue clothing dye after the process is completed. The British paid us a bounty to grow the indigo exclusively for them, for their Navy uniforms and for the royal robes. Well, of course, when the Revolutionary War ended, that was the end of indigo. The British lost the war and for some reason no longer wanted our indigo. So it was then that the gentlemen turned to the growing of rice. And we grew more rice than anyone in the world. Now, of course, the 6 rivers of Georgetown County have given the most perfect environment for the growing of rice. From earliest days in the early 1700s until 1861, when the war between the states started, rice came into the American coast around 1680, when a ship laden with rice from Madagascar had incurred some damage during a storm and put into Charleston for repairs, and they left a bag of seed rice as part of the payments. So that's how rice got here. And we became the wealthiest county in the entire United States for the growing of rice. But sadly, every grain of rice and every penny of the millions of dollars was through the labor of the enslaved Africans. Georgetown County had a ratio of 85% Black to white population in the census of 1860. Georgetown exported as much as 10 million pounds of rice each year at the height of the rice culture. The multi-millions of dollars earned by the elite white population was, of course, as we said, due to the efforts of the enslaved Africans. Another American first is that in the early 1900s, from 1899 until 1932, Georgetown had the largest lumber mill in the entire nation. By 1966, it reached that height of lumber production. Now, many houses, many of the homes that are still existing in Georgetown were built to accommodate the many workers at the ACL. In fact, the west part of the west part of Fraser Street were built many duplex and single houses, which were built for the workers for middle management of the mills, and many of them are still there today. Joseph Hayne Rainey was the very first African American ever to go to Congress, and he's from right here in Georgetown. He served in the House of Representatives from 1868 to 1880. He was the son of enslaved Africans who had been able to purchase their freedom. His father and Joseph himself were barbers in Charleston. When the war between the states began, Joseph knew as a freeman that he would be inducted into the Confederate Army and forced to build fortifications. So he fled to Bermuda and came back to Georgetown when the war ended. In 1868, he was appointed to the House of Representatives and through the South Carolina legislature, and then was elected until 1880. He left Congress in 1880 and stayed in Washington until 1886, working for the Internal Revenue Service, and returned to Georgetown ill. He died in 1887, and another sad fact is we don't even know where he's buried. Another American first is that Georgetown has the oldest recovered vessel in the United States, the Brown's Ferry vessel, which was alluded to a few minutes ago by Justin and Hope. This vessel was built in the early 1700s. It was raised in 1977, restored, and is now on the 3rd floor of the Rice Museum on Front Street. But its discovery gave a lot of technological information about how early ships were built in those days, which was non-existent at that time.
Mary?
Yes.
Just for the sake of time, if you could wrap up in the next minute or so.
I will be happy to. The Gullah culture was developed in Georgetown County, and some of the unsung facts are that the ingenuity, artistry, and creativity of these people can be seen still today. This is a rice trunk invented by them. Sweetgrass baskets are part of their artistry, and their architectural skills are found today in many of the buildings that we have. Of course, Winyah Bay is the life force of Georgetown County. And one of the interesting things about Winyah Bay is that there was originally a peninsula from Maryville over into the Stampede River. In 1954, a cut was made right along in this area to allow ships to come through. And now we have Goat Island. Well, we haven't even mentioned many other parts of our presentation, like the Swamp Fox, Francis Marion, the Revolutionary War, the story of Theodosia, the sinking of the Harvest Moon in Winyah Bay, and of course, more of the Gullah culture. So I hope you'll go to our Facebook page, Georgetown County Museum, which is which we put on lots of stories about our heritage and culture. Hope to see you in the museum soon. And thank you for having us as part of your presentation.
Thank you so much, Mary. You did a great job packing as much history in 10 minutes as anyone possibly could. All right, so at this point, I know we're running up against time, but I wanted to let participants ask a question, maybe just one burning question if someone has been really eager to ask a question of our speakers. And I'll give people just a minute to think, and I can have all our panel speakers come back on camera. Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now. How about for just one quick question for everyone? It's a little bit of a brain teaser. If you met someone from a visitor to Georgetown County or someone who just moved here, what's like one word you would use to say why Georgetown County and Winyah Bay are a special place?
I'm going to say community.
I like that. Thanks.
History and culture, 2 words.
That's fine.
I'm with history with diversity. I've got hyphens.
I would say, go ahead, Zenobia.
I think that I would say community with diversity.
I would say complex.
I think those are all very true, and complex wraps it all up. So thank you all. We don't have a question in the box, but we do have just a comment that Marilyn, your singing was beautiful. So thank you for that.
Oh,
I concur.
All right.
yes,
Well,
it was.
so I just want to wrap up by saying a huge thank you to all our panelists, as well as a thank you to everyone who watched today. I have just a few quick announcements before we wrap up. So I want to just give a reminder that the Waccamaw Conference is a whole month of events. We're coming up on the end, but we still have a few more ways to get involved. So you can go to the Waccamaw Conference website to learn about upcoming events. We have an ongoing bio blitz on iNaturalist. We have a student poster contest. This weekend, there's going to be a boat ramp cleanup at East Bay Park in Georgetown. So that'll be on Saturday morning, and you can read more about that on the Waccamaw Conference website. And our final seminar will just be an Earth Day celebration conference wrap up this Thursday on Earth Day. So we hope to see you all there. And with that, I'll say thank you again and have a great day.
Thank you, Maeve.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm gonna lay down my burden
Down by
the riverside.
Oh, down